Okay, in this video we are going to treat a monopoly. If you can recall very well, in the last lecture we have treated a perfect competitive firm. So monopoly is a polar opposite of perfect competitive firm. If you can recall very well, in the perfect competitive firm is a market whereby there are many buyers and many sellers, while in monopoly, as the word mono means single in the market, there's single seller in the market. So there were a lot of monopolies, and we do mentions monopoly in our day-to-day business explanations or discussions. For instance, some do consider Microsoft as monopolizing the market for Windows, until recent where we have the Apple, the iOS operating system. A long time ago, 30 years ago, when the IBM was the sole producer of the computer, personal computer, it enjoys monopoly market conditions, market status. Well, OPEC, some were mistakenly categorizing OPEC as a monopoly. No, it's not. It's oligopoly, because the OPEC doesn't have a monopoly of crude oil. Rather, there were some non-OPEC members that are supplying crude to the whole markets. So in this lecture, we are going to treat how monopoly is making profits. Is he making abnormal profit or normal profit? Is there any forms of discriminations in the monopolistic market scenario, and what are the differences between the monopoly and the perfect competitive firm? So monopoly is a market whereby there is a single seller in the market. Sometimes the issue of monopoly power arises as a result of legal barrier. In some countries, provisions of basic utilities like electricity and the water, it has been monopolized by government institutions or by companies that were authorized by government to supply them because of their relative importance to individuals. If maybe market forces, if competitions were allowed in such sectors, the price might be very high because of the fear of collusion. Some firms may group themselves and agree to be charging higher price. Just example of what is going on. And last week when OPEC meet and try to cut down the productions in order to drive up the price of the crude oil. So these are kind of the collusive actions of oligopoly. That's a market whereby there are few producers of supplying some scarce products. So also, after legal barrier, sociological barriers do arises, and some of the resources are natural, cannot be gotten everywhere in the world. For instance, petroleum is not endowed everywhere in the world. Some few countries, the Middle East, the Arab countries, and some few African countries, and America and UK, very few countries in the world that are endowed with the crude oil. So endowment of natural resources is one of the conditions that warrants having a monopoly of a particular resources. Monopoly of a particular resource in a particular market. Then what are the key differences between the monopoly and the perfect competitive markets? In the perfect competitive market, if you recall, we do mention that the firms are the price taker. They don't have a market power to regulate the price, rather they take the price as given. While in the monopoly, as being the single producer in the market, he can decide what to charge for the goods and services he's consumed. Sometimes decisions with respect to the price, it might not be easy for monopoly, because if he supplies so many goods and services, then he cannot be able to control the price. So monopolies mostly decide on what to do, either to supply very few quantity of goods and services so that the market forces will bid up the price as demand is higher than the supply, or sometimes he will try and set down the price and allow the market forces to determine the quantity, because being him the single producer, if he set very exorbitant price, then only those that can afford to buy can purchase those goods and services, while those that cannot, they have to forget about it in the absence of income that is sufficient enough to go for such monopolistic goods. So two things are involved in deciding what to do. Either he control the price, allow the market forces to determine the quantity, or he control the quantity, allow the market forces to determine the price. Or like the perfect competitive, whereby the forces of competition that determines both the quantity and the price of goods and services. Secondly, monopoly doesn't take into account of the decisions of other competing products in deciding what to do. Unlike perfect competitive firms, whatever decisions that the firm is undertaking must consider that maybe other competing firms may also implement the same strategy, while monopoly, such kind of things are not. The imperfect competitive firm, the firm is too small to affect the price. It's too small. We see that each firm controls very small fraction of the market share, while in the monopoly, being him the single producer, he can affect the prices of goods and services. So what are the conditions for profit maximizations of monopoly? It's the same thing. Profit maximizations for all markets, be it monopoly, be it oligopoly, be it monopolistic competitions, it's attained at the point where the market, where the marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. So such is the positions that enable the monopolistic firm to maximize its revenue. Then this is the tabular presentations of the output produced by monopolistic firm, the price charges, you can see, or like in perfect competitive firm where the price is fixed. For the monopoly, the price is not fixed, it changes, fluctuates. When there is scarcity of the product, when the zero output is produced, the price is a maximum 36. When 1 unit output, the demand is greater than supply, the price is 33. And when 2 units of output are produced, then the price falls down from 33 to 30. And at 0.5, when 5 units of output is produced, then the price is 21. You can see that if there is scarcity of the product, then the price of such product used to go high, and at the price, as more outputs are produced, then the price used to come down. Well, this is the marginal revenue, price times quantity, then we obtain the marginal revenue. Like this, the marginal revenue, we obtain the total revenue, price times quantity gives the total revenue, total revenue. Well, the marginal revenue is the change in total revenue as a result of change in outputs. 33 times 1 give the total revenue 33. Well, 30 times 2, the total revenue is 60. Then when you subtract the changes, 60 minus 33, which is the changes, which is marginal revenue is 27. Then so also on the 81, when you subtract 81 minus 60, it gives 21. So a point where the marginal cost equal to marginal revenue, that's where the monopoly maximizes its profits. And you can see here in the profits, at this point, the profit is minus 47, minus 50, minus 15, minus 10, 10, 27, 34, 27, 6, and 37. So we're going to, this point as unit, as output 4, seems to be where the profit is maximum. And monopoly will try to ensure that he produces goods and services that gives him maximum revenue. And if market is characterized by a monopolistic syndrome or circumstance, then he will produce 4 units of outputs so that he makes his highest profit of 34. So we are going to see an illustrations in monopoly. We say the profit is maximized where the marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. So if marginal revenue is less than the marginal cost, then monopolies can make profit by decreasing outputs, because once he decreases output, then he will reduce the rate at which he is losing them, by implication that he is making more profit. While on the other hand, if marginal revenue is greater than marginal cost, then monopoly will make more profit by selling more outputs, while the profit is maximized at the point where the two curves intersect, that the marginal cost equal to marginal revenue. Let's make an graphical illustrations of how monopoly determine his price and how he maximizes his profits. This is the MC curve. The red line is the MC curve, which is upward sloping. The marginal revenue is not the same with demand, or like in perfect competition. This is the demand curve. This is the marginal revenue curve. This is the point of intersections between marginal revenue and the marginal C, which is the first conditions for profit maximizations. Then monopoly will produce 4 units of output. Then you draw the line tangent to the demand curves. Then the price is 24. So at this point, monopoly maximizes his profits. So why, if it is the market conditions, if it is a perfect competition, is there any changes? So if it is market competitive firms, the price will be determined at the point of intersection between supply curve and the demand curve. And we all know that MC is the market supply curve. At the point of intersections between demand curve and the MC curve, which represents supply curve, will have been the price for perfect competitive firm, and more unit of output will be produced, as opposed to monopoly that will produce 4 units, while in perfect competitive firm it will have been 5 units of output, and the price is lower, which will be around maybe 19 to 20, while monopoly will charge 24. So perfect competitive firm is more efficient than monopoly, while monopoly creates artificial scarcity in order to make exorbitant profit in the absence of competition. So also you can see that there is a deadweight loss in the monopoly corresponding to this area, which is deadweight loss of consumer, and there is also loss of consumer surplus associated. All these are associated with monopoly. So if we have a cost functions like this, when we introduce the cost function by having the average total costs, then 0 to CM Q to AB represents total costs, while the total revenue is 0 to PM Q to A. Then when you subtract total costs out of total revenue, we have profits, and the profit is a gray area that is shaded. Thus, monopoly is making abnormal profits. Then under what condition can monopoly make normal profit? Normal profit can be met if the total cost is tangent to the price. So if monopoly can produce at PM, can produce QM quantity of output and PM price, then monopoly will make normal profits or break-even profits. Then monopoly can only incur loss if he produce at the point where he cannot recover the total cost. If he cannot recover the total cost, then the monopoly is incurring loss. Therefore, monopoly must decide on how to recover the profits. In most cases, they usually lower the unit of output produced, so that to create artificial scarcity in the market in order to drive up the price with demand, with higher demand. When demand is higher than supply, as usual, the price of goods and services will rise. So this shaded area signifies the total loss that is incurred by the monopoly. So you can see that the major differences between the monopoly and the perfect competitive firm is that in perfect competition firms, the firms are price takers. They control very small fractions of the market share, so they don't have power to dictate the price to be charged. Rather, the market forces are the main constraints, main factors that determine the price of goods and services. While on the other hand, in monopoly, is a single seller producing goods and services that consumed by large number of buyers. So in that respect, being him the single seller, he controls the market share. He can decide on what to charge from the goods and services he's supplying, and by that implications he can make a maximum profits. And sometimes monopolies do make discriminations that looking at the elasticity of demand of different buyers. The buyer with inelastic demand, then monopoly can charge him very high price, because such buyers doesn't usually respond to the price increases, while the buyers whose demand is highly elastic, the monopoly may charge him an affordable price. However, before such discrimination can be possible, it must be one condition must be satisfied, that monopoly can be able to segregate the two markets, can demarcate the two markets, so that it will be almost impossible for another intermediary or another person to take the goods that monopoly supply in a market whose price is low to market whose price is high, so that he can make profit out of that. So if that happens, then the monopoly power has been broken. So in essence, monopoly charges high prices, and governments most times do control monopoly power. So many countries, they do implement anti-monetary policy in order to see that consumers are protected from undue exploitations of monopoly. So in the subsequent video, the next video, we are going to see monopolistic competitions, which is the extensions of monopoly. There's a market that possesses some of the feature of monopoly market and some of the other features of perfect competition firms. Okay, until then, bye-bye.